Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. Once again, we are back with another episode. This is episode 93, almost at 100 episodes. And every single week, I try to bring someone on who has a lot of experience in the ADU space, real estate space, development space. And this week is no different. And, in these previous episodes that I've talked about ADUs, I've focused a lot in California. I've brought in people from different states to see what's working in other states, especially for those investors who listen in, who may have thoughts about, investing out of state in other pockets, not just in California. And also, because I want to learn more about what's working in other states. And today we're diving into the ADU market in Colorado with Chris Moore, who is the founder of Prospect 38 Construction. Chris is a third generation builder and design build expert. He's specializing in custom homes, additions, ADUs, and we're going to talk about real construction cost, zoning updates, legislative climates, and just your typical questions that most people have, whether you're a homeowner or an investor. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Chris, and he'll tell us a little bit about how he got started, because obviously he's multiple generations in the business. So I'm always curious to see, like, what was that like growing up in construction and development, and how has that shaped your business now?
Right. Well, first off, Stephanie, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity and the warm greeting there. Yeah, growing up in the construction business, I was born down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was mostly swamps back then, and so my dad was a builder. He plumber, moved down from Chicago, started building some subdivisions down there, subdivisions and condo buildings, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So a lot of moving. We moved around a lot, built something, lived in a bit, sold, and then eventually we moved up to the Aspen area in about 1980. My mom went up there for a weekend, called my dad and said, "I love it here. You need to come check it out." And then we kind of split time back and forth while he phased out some of the Florida projects. And then about 1985, 86, we lived up in the mountains here full time. And so I finished that, did preschool, middle school, all that stuff up there, high school, graduated, went to Colorado State here in
Mhm.
Fort Collins, and then moved back up there to the Roaring Fork Valley for about 4 or 5 years, continued building with my dad. We had a couple projects up there, spec builds and some investment building. Then had a fiance that arrangement didn't go so well, so moved back down here to Denver where there was some more opportunity for that. So about 2006, I moved here and I've been living here ever since. We've got married, started a family, and started my company in 2006. Did renovations, different things, some commercial work, and now about 2000, I'd say 15. I started getting on this, doing additions, and these ADUs kind of started taking form and gaining some popularity. And I really enjoyed. I like the renovations, but I enjoyed. It's just such a mess, especially on some of these turn of the century homes. There's always a can of worms, and the anxiety levels being in the client space is really high. So it's nice to be able to build their dream. Not everything can be this big beautiful house that we're always fortunate and blessed to be able to do, but we're building something new. We're helping the families out. There's a little renovation that we'll often do, but we're out of their space. Temperatures seem to be a little cooler, which is nice, and wind just rolls through that. So I've been kind of focused on that, like you said, additions and ADUs, mostly in the metro area, around the periphery, and in the mountains. We'll do some custom home builds here and there, but that's really been our focus for the last 10 to 12 years now.
Wow. So you said around 2015 was when ADUs kind of started to take off in Colorado. I remember 2017 was around the time when I started, looking into ADUs and learning about what was allowed and what was state law at that time. And then, yeah, I quickly started shifting my focus on it because I saw the opportunity and more than anything, like what it solves, right? And I think ADUs are they solve for so many different reasons for family purposes, housing, in general, and just like that middle housing gap that most people struggle with, right? And I think ADUs are very flexible and they can meet you wherever you are in life. It could be and we'll talk about like why people are building out there, But yeah, what was that like in 2015 when you started noticing like either legislation being more pro ADU housing, and what was that looking like at
Yeah,
that time?
the zoning didn't really start loosening up here until the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years. Um, the beginning, the early stages of this, it was a battle, and there still are little hiccups and whatnot
Yes.
that you have to kind of fight through and get creative on sometimes. But so say in Boulder County, what they were doing was they were allowing for some ADUs, but you could only have so many ADU projects or properties with ADUs within a certain diameter, circumference, radius of
Mm,
that lot. So say, 20% within a quarter mile
certain
radius.
pocket. Mhm.
Yeah, so it was a bit restrictive there. All that's kind of opened up a little bit, but it's really not that much difference. There's always some little wrinkle that you have to deal with, whether design or sizing or this or that to get to go through. But it's definitely opened up a lot more now, and we'll get into this later. Just the changing
Right.
landscape of this between lending, how they're kind of dealing with it, appraisal value, how those are going for banks. um, Insurance is a whole nother,
That's a big one right now.
capacity that,
Mhm.
how do you kind of deal with this? And then obviously the zoning and building departments, and the new codes are coming down with some regulations that are kind of ADU specific. We'll go into that a little bit later, but um, yeah, the whole landscape and the whole world is kind of trying to play catch up a little bit. And so right now here in Colorado, it's fairly favorable. Last year, the state government came in and issued a law that's saying that all single family zoned lots were eligible to have an ADU structure. Now there were some restrictions on that, city size, and then HOAs can do, they'll have their review. They're made to subdivisions are made to have these ADUs now, but there's still some restrictions. Obviously, within each municipality, there's different lot coverages and different ways to kind of, constrain that a little bit. But the pendulum right now is great, but we're already seeing that starting to slide back a little bit. One is cost, and then two, we just had a special election here in the town I live in, Lakewood, which is a western suburb of Denver, fairly populous, and they voted to the city council had introduced some more lenient zoning laws to have more density in areas. Single family
Right.
zoned lots were able to have 2 units, 3 units, triplex type thing introduced into that. Um, Kind of they just did that on their own. I guess there wasn't a lot of citizen input on that. And they did a special election, and they're going to redo the whole zoning code to try to curtail that back a little bit. And so it's interesting. I'm not sure that there's a political stance on it one way or the other, because it's
Yeah.
just, I believe in single family neighborhoods. I believe in having that experience. So I understand that. At the same time, you do need do you want to have these radiuses that you can only some people can have these units? So it's a complicated issue for sure.
Yeah, and advocacy has been one of my biggest, yeah, goals this year, which is why, I went out to Sacramento like 2 weeks ago to testify on a bill that was addressing impact fees here in California.
Right.
But, in California, most of the people that listen in, they kind of already know like at the state level what's allowed. And in California, by right, if it's a residential zoning type of property, you can build up to two. So you could have a conversion, which is, an attached ADU, and you can have a detached. Now, is that feasible for every property? Not all the time,
Right.
but by right, you have the ability to do that. And in California, we have the residential law of ADUs being able to have two on a lot. And then we also have SB9, which is subdividing lots and being able to add, like up to 4 units on a single family home. So we've been doing a lot of those 1 to 3 unit SB9s. And then you can utilize SB9 and ADU and kind of like bill stack that strategy. So
Yeah.
that's been our strategy with residential. And then we have also multifamily laws. we had SB 1211, which allows us to add up to 8 detached ADUs on an existing 8 unit, or up to 8. So you could have a duplex and you can add two. You could have a fourplex and add four. Up to 8 is the cap. And so that's been our primary focus, right? Like we now have a path for multifamily as well. What is it like in Colorado, just, or even in like your pocket? Because it seems like there's something at the state level, but then hyper locally with municipalities and counties, you guys have to also figure out which county
Yeah,
is
how to do
easier
it.
to work
So
with.
yeah, I was looking at Denver zoning for a client yesterday, and we've done
Mhm.
a project on this property 2 years ago. The zoning, they said lot coverage was 37.5%. They're having a new buyer came in, so I was discussing some options there with them. And Denver County and City has now upped that 37.5% lot coverage up to 40%. It may have even been 45%. I don't remember. So they've opened that up.
Mhm.
But what you're describing there in California of the multiple ADUs in a single family zoned, area and then subdividing, that's not coming here. It's going to be a decade, 15 years down the road, if it happens at all.
Yeah.
Even though we're a fairly blue state, that kind of density is just not a winning issue here, at least in the suburbs. And again, proof of that is this special referendum that they had here in Lakewood. So, and it's Lakewood's a very blue city. We're in a blue county, and so that this is what they were going for, though. Now we have areas though where we can do some higher volume. There's a street called Colfax here. That's we did we passed the marijuana laws and all that kind of stuff, and it did help take up some of the decrepit and rundown commercial space,
Mhm.
but this is a huge long street. I think it's the longest continuous straight street in America.
Oh, wow.
And the entire thing is just kind of seedy, kind of dangerous. There's little pockets, and they have, especially more towards the urban area of Denver. They have some bars and restaurants and stuff. But on whole, there's vagrancy. There's homeless camps. They're trying to reintroduce, tearing down maybe some malls that weren't working or commercial spaces and get
Right.
some high volume condos there. Lower income availabilities there. There's places here to do it. I think that in California, it's just been overbuilt and it's been going on for decades there. So
Right.
now
Right.
that Denver's growing, there are pockets and opportunities to have this. So I guess it's probably good that I'm not on a board trying to figure all this out, because again, I'm conflicted. Even as a builder, I don't know that I believe in having all these ADU units in a single family zoned area. But at the same time, obviously, I've staked my business on it, and then I'm also not too much for having the county and cities and all these municipalities telling you what you can do with your lot. So there's a
Yeah.
balancing
Yeah.
act on this, and it needs to be done smartly and take the. I'd rather have it go slowly and see. We're losing population here, right now. So how do all these factors
And that's
come
an
in play?
important distinction to make, right? Like SB9 and all these strategies that I threw out, they're working in California, but that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it's going to work in other states, right?
Right,
And I think in Colorado, you may not need to go that high dense in certain pockets because
right,
it's just not needed, right?
yeah,
But in some areas, I think overall, like nationally, there should be some sort of like strategy with unused space, a lot of commercial unused space,
yeah,
right? In
yeah.
certain pockets. But, going back to ADUs in Colorado, like what is working? What is working in certain areas, like let's say in Lakewood, right? What are most people building? Like, is it 4 to 600 square foot detached units,
Yeah,
conversions? Like
we
what
get
is
a
it?
lot of conversions, and that's probably more for a mass market kind of thing, because the prices conceivably are lower. They're really not, though. By the time we're opening up the walls, bringing everything up to code, getting the R values placed, and all this stuff, and then sometimes even having to do some structural issues, work there. Especially if we're
Right,
doing, saying, the unit on top of the garage, and the garage is just on a slab or a monolithic slab type of thing, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
right.
But it's, people Google it, it's a low entry point into this, and then maybe I can rent it out or this or that. I don't do a ton of those. I think it's probably a remodel contractor maybe might work a little bit better. But again, once you get into all the codes and all the different things from the city, even they, like a normal remodeler might be a little bit overwhelmed by all
Mm,
that's going on. Typically, we're doing, yeah. There's quite a bit of detached. Usually, people are wanting a garage, so to have some off-street parking. So the garage and then the unit above, and that can be a three-car garage, two-car garage. It just kind of depends. Mostly what I deal with, and I think probably my preferred project is the multi-generational living, which is the kind of code word that we've gone over. I
right.
have it in my marketing and whatnot. But I started doing these home shows here in Denver, Colorado, home garden show and the Denver home show, and the first couple of years, yeah, people there are a lot of interest in that. It's weaned off a bit, but it's mostly families, elderly members moving in. There's a lot of reason that makes sense. We can help out with them as they're getting older in years. They can be a part of the family. They can help with, childcare, this and
They
that.
can downsize too from
Yeah, they
their
can
bigger
downsize.
house. Mhm.
And so we're working on one right now. It's, about 1,000 square feet in a 400 square foot garage. Um, sometimes we're going a little smaller. It depends on if it's, maybe it's just a mom moving in. We also have children moving in,
Right,
into
right.
their parents. And most of these are getting privately funded. So they're selling their primary residence, taking that, private equity and bringing it in. We're seeing more and more investments getting sold to kind of fund things as they go along. And the banks it's tough because you're doing either, probably not that many people have enough in the HELOC to make that work. So they're having to
Right.
refi the house. Most of these people aren't, on the newer rates. So they're at 3 and 4%. To lose that to get to 5 to 6,
It doesn't
that
make sense, yeah.
it doesn't make sense. So the reason I like these multi-generational living situations is we've done work for empty nesters and they're going to, do the passive income and whatnot, but the numbers to make sense, you're dealing with, if you're trying to figure it in a cost per square foot anytime in the next 5 years and get that money back or have it, it's not going to work if you're thinking
No,
about it from that way. It's going
exactly.
to work if you let it appreciate 10, 15 years and we're servicing a need of a family member. We're tugging on the heartstrings a little bit here, but it's the reality, and then once that situation changes, then it can become maybe a passive income opportunity there. It just allows a lot of flexibility though. But if we're dealing with it 10 years down the road where we might sell, or 15, then especially on these smaller ones, they can, 400 or 500 square foot, we're probably doing like $600-700 per square foot by the time we do the permits and the plans and everything. 800 square feet or so, we're starting to get to, in the 400s, low 400s, only around say 1,200 to 1,500 and over square feet, we're getting to normal, what people would consider normal building costs of, sometimes probably 1,200, in the 300s, but 1,500, 2,000. We look at some of these larger homes we do, 5,000 6,000 square feet. We're, close to 200, $220 a square foot. That sounds great, but we
Right.
can't do that, at scale.
Exactly. No, and I think that's a good point is it's all long-term
Mhm.
appreciation. You're creating forced appreciation that's going to happen over time, but at least for now, it really helps solve a lot of different, not even issues, but it just meets you where you are in your life. We help, I'd say about 50% of our clients are empty nesters, multi-generational living, and the other half is investors.
Mhm.
And most of them, is right now it's better to have your grandparents live in the ADU versus paying 6 to 8 thousand a month in assisted living. It just makes total sense. And then eventually in the future, people are like, okay, right now it's for my grandparents. Then soon after, when things happen, then it could be for my son who's going to come
Right.
back from college. And then
Yeah.
when my son leaves, then it could eventually be my
Keeps changing.
retirement and I can rent it out, right? So I
Yeah.
think when I'm having those conversations with clients, even if right now it's to house a family member, when we talk about functionality and the design of the space, we're thinking like long term, right? And yeah, that's great. I mean, it's really some of the same reasons why people are building
Yeah. Well, the
here
choice
in
of
California.
materials and whatnot, trying to keep it reasonable, but get the looks that we want, but also
Right.
be very durable, easily replaceable. Because I mean, even the grandparents are probably gonna be fine, but you get your kid in there, and then certainly a tenant, you're like, "What herd of animals stormed through here last night? Like, how did
Right.
this happen?" You know?
Yeah.
But we just did a spot for a guy he's doing some stuff for Home and Garden TV, that's gonna be coming up, and we went into one of these most recent builds for a multi-generational type situation. We did a quick tour. We kind of did a little bit of, talking about the ADU situation. Then they brought on the homeowner. She brought up kind of an interesting point. I mean, I know it, because we've done enough, but it was just to hear her say it. Of it's not just having them there, but you could buy a condo, and we have a bunch of people who will go and buy condos for their parents or this or that. But
Mhm.
she's saying, it's nice to be able to not have to call and do that whole rigmarole of, is it okay? Is it a good time to come over? Let's get all the kids together, get everyone over there, or have them, get to you. They're right there. You want to see them, you close the door, things are okay. So it just lends a little bit, especially us as parents, we're all stressed for time. Instead of having to, Stella's got to go run to a volleyball game here. Oh no, we have to go and pick up grandma first. No, we're there. We grab her, and we're saving time here. And then obviously there's
And
the
I'm sure,
flexibility.
I mean, even like for a lot of grandparents, right? And like just people having a co-living situation, I think health-wise and mental health-wise, long
Yes,
term is a lot better than having them in a facility or having them live by themselves, you
right.
know? And so I think it
So
goes both
during
ways. Yeah, it helps to have that multi-generational
during this
co-living
build
situation.
that during the build that we were interviewing for, that we
Mhm.
just finished, yeah, the mother had dementia. She moved up from Texas. The husband had just recently passed. And they were telling me often during the build, she's waking up, she's not really sure what's going on, where's my stuff, this and that. And they were getting more and more concerned that she was sliding down that hill quicker and
Right.
quicker. Like within a week of us getting the furniture in and she's in there, they're like, this has improved quickly. Her mental faculties have really improved. She's aware of what's going on now. Like it's coming back now that she's in her surroundings, even though it's a different space, different place. But the comfort level is back, and whatever that trick is, it just helped her, cognitively kind of get it back, which really
Yeah, being able to
hits you in the
socialize
feels,
is yeah, being able to
you know?
socialize, especially at that age, is just so important, and
Yep.
that could be the difference between them living for another 10 to 15 years versus, like,
Right.
having some sort of, yeah, issues like that, and then we see that a lot, but that's why I'm a huge advocate of either strategy, whether it's, for family purposes right now and maybe investment. What do you see as being, like, the best ROI if we're talking to, let's say, some of these investors? Would you say you get and I know, we obviously said most of it is over time, it appreciates over time, but which, types of ADUs are the preferred ones that you think would give you the best returns? Like, for example, here in LA and Orange County, I'd say like your go-to is somewhere between 5 to 700 square feet, 2 bed, 1 bath. Those smaller units sometimes outperform the bigger 3 bedroom, 2 baths. But we're very high dense area, right? I'm talking like LA, Long Beach, these very high dense areas. So the smaller units do perform better. But what does
Right.
it look like out there?
Yeah, I would probably say I would agree with that. I would say the units, 5 to 800 square foot above the garage. I think to get the parking, off the street and to have that option, just whatever increases flexibility for the space the most. Whether or not you use that garage, the second car garage, or even the third space for the tenant or for yourself, just offers a lot of flexibility. I would say, for those smaller units on the 500 square foot, like fitting 2 bedrooms in there is, I think, very challenging.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very tight. Mhm.
yeah, it's tight. So we're getting calls on that. Oh, can we do, 400 or 500 square foot and 2 bedroom? I'm like, I don't think that's a
No,
thing.
that's not
Or
even possible.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're studios, and that's what it is. But whatever probably increases the flexibility. I do a lot of attached additions, and
okay.
have them be ADUs, and that's mostly to get around some of the zoning issues. So again, the one that we were speaking of just recently, that was in Denver. The rules have loosened a little bit, but the family decided, hey, look, we're strapped here at say 1,000 square feet. Um, they wanted like a basement underneath that everyone could use. And so going through that design process, Denver's like, well, we don't want a door here, this and that. I'm like, what do you care whether there's,
Yeah.
a
Right.
door? Like all these crazy thoughts. So we got around the ADU laws, went with the attached addition and termed it as that. We were able to get the size that the family needed. And then, whether or not we're having a full working kitchen or not shown in the plans, that's what it is, whatever we need to do there. So say we took down
Exactly.
the range. The space was there. The inspectors know what's going on. We don't have it wired just yet, but the inspectors aren't checking what's going on zoning wise. There's just too much going on for them to be
Yeah.
dialed in that. So whatever we need to do, verbiage wise or show on the plans, that's fine. But it does create, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the insurance issue, of if the people do put in a range into that area and then that structure catches fire and it's not permitted for it, you know, even if it is
Yeah.
permitted for it, how are you differentiating? How's the insurance company and the loan companies differentiating between these two different structures? You
And
know?
insurance in general is just very difficult right now to get coverage on,
Yep.
which is a whole other conversation. I
Right.
I had an event where we talked about that. It's a deal breaker sometimes. But, yeah, I mean, I think hopefully at some point it gets a little bit better. I mean, we're still working on it even here in California, right? It's not as streamlined because bills keep passing, they keep modifying them, and then we see what the issues are at the local level once we start implementing, and then once we like, with a lot of these bigger projects, we're running into utility capacity because if you're gonna
Right.
add 8 to 20 ADUs on, I spoke to someone who has a 63 unit
Oh,
building,
wow.
like, near Newport Beach, and he wants to add he could technically add, like, 15, if we use, well, probably more than that. But at that point, we're having other discussions, like, not just the design and build costs, but everything around it, structurally, power upgrades, electrical, utility upgrades in general, and that could be a lot as well.
Yeah.
So,
So a lot
um
of this is, and you guys will probably get there before we will,
right.
of the stress on the utilities, the stress on the streets, the infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. And then public mood, the neighborhood mood
Right.
as we have one in our backyard, not for my property, but our neighbor behind us. And I built a low fence, so we see the structure. It's fine. But if they had a rough tenant in there or someone, we didn't prefer, like that's an issue, as my at the time, she was 5 and 6 when she grew up there, is playing in the backyard. And there's a whole, once again, just all the bureaucracy of hashing out these details. Because you start getting into, what is it, like fair housing practices and this and that. So I
Exactly.
don't necessarily want to rent to person X, but the law says I have to, So all that, once all those factors start shaking up, that's what I'm saying the pendulum's going to swing back here a bit. I'm a bit surprised that this Lakewood thing passed and they're redoing it this quickly. Okay, we'll see. They might put it all back together and make it worse. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
and
that
I do
pendulum,
I do agree that you have to this strategy doesn't work everywhere and in every
right,
neighborhood. You really do have to pick and choose. I mean, there was San Diego had this bonus program and they pushed back on it because and they did some modifications with that bonus program because of one investor who just outdid it in a specific pocket.
right,
He like built I think it was something ridiculous, like 50 ADUs because they have, that bonus program, but he built it in a very suburban, cul-de-sac corner type of property. And so yeah, everyone in that neighborhood was furious because he did that. I mean, it wasn't the right move to do in that specific pocket. So
right,
understanding where is definitely something to be mindful of and
yeah.
everything we mentioned. But what is
So
the
I was
time
looking earlier on
yeah,
some of the concerns of people who are pro a little more density in the stuff, but they're talking not having the McMansions, right, having some yard space with that, but the builder and the investor are going to max that out no matter what the rules are. The market's going to find a way, and it's going to be the same. They're going to build as much as they possibly can, whether it's 2 or 3 units or even a single unit. Especially like here in Denver, it's the only deal that works. So there's no more upward mobility in these um, predominantly say older Hispanic neighborhoods or
mhm,
African American neighborhoods that are like called Rhino area. those families had to move out because no one is going in and buying these 100-year-old houses that are small that don't work. Back in the day, you could do it, you could fix it up, this and that, and then move on
Right.
to the next thing. But that's not a reality anymore. So these buyers, these lenders, sorry, the builders, developers are coming in. They scrape the house and they're putting up a Lego block. Box is going to be 3 stories high. And if they need to
Right.
do 2, 3 units, that's what it'll be. If it's just one house, that's what it's going to be. The total value is going to be all selling for $1.52 million, and that's what it's going to be every single time. You
Yep.
know, so it's
Exactly.
again, I'm glad I'm not. We're just trying to get through, keep our heads down here. We can interject our opinion on things a little bit, and so moving in, I guess, to the last phase of this is cost. Um,
Cost. Yes.
yeah, and I think obviously it's
Cost and time frame, because I think, like, for example, we do a lot of either garage conversions is probably our biggest one because it's the most cost effective for
mhm,
people in SoCal. And a typical garage conversion is running, we do design and build, 150,000 to 180,000, and the time frame from start to finish is 10 to 12 months.
yeah, yeah. Regardless, there we lost audio again.
Oh,
Weird. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
12
and
months.
that's it. Just is what it is, because you have to put the plans together. There might be
Right.
some structural things, and then getting through the building department, and then especially with that kind of renovation, different things, and you're usually having to build the floor up or take the old floor out and get insulation under there. It is
Mhm.
what it is. The 10 to 12 month, that's what we're doing, our normal ADUs for as well. I just, yeah, that those lower numbers of the 150 to 180, it's just real tight. And if there's an issue there, the money goes away for the corporation, and they don't make as much sense. What I find to be, people are always surprised at the cost of these things, especially on the lower end. The architects and people, we do design build as well. We'll get people who come in with plans all the time. Hey, we got this done, 20, 30,000, and then we get it out to bid. And I've had the architects be off 50%. And I've called them like, how are you giving these numbers? How are you this far? But there's no apology. There's no, hey, this is what it is. No, like, it's not that hard to find out the true costs on things. So we're either with these people's plans having to redo the plan, or they're biting the bullet, or we're scrapping the project altogether. That happens 5 to 6 times per year. So
We
um,
try to say no to a lot of the clients and leads that come to us with plans approved already or
mhm,
close to approval. We don't really like to bid those out because we don't know who this architect is.
right,
And we have one right now that we decided to take on, which we shouldn't have. And it's been at least like 4 to 5 months just to get the address changed on the plans. And it's
I,
like,
oh
you
my
know,
gosh,
yeah, yeah. Then
yeah.
it's those little things that it's like, come on, it's the
It helps to be
importance
able to
of
yell at the guys every now and then, to be able to call and be like, Jim, what are we doing here? Come
what are
on.
we doing?
Yeah,
Exactly. But
yeah,
that was, part of the reason why they decided to choose their own architect or drafter and contractor so they could save some money. But in reality, you're
never
not.
works.
It never works. So, yeah, I do think that you should work with a design and build. And if you work with a different architect and contractor, just making sure that they've worked together, that they both understand what's allowed, what's feasible, and they have a good understanding of at least like ADUs, because ADUs is not just, your typical like, conversion or renovation. At least here, it doesn't work that way. You really have to understand policy and
Yeah.
how to get that through. Yeah.
Denver, they're making them repair or replace all the sewer lines. So if it's the old clay stuff, for a while there, they wouldn't even let you line or pipe burst
Oh my
the
God.
old line. So that, I think they finally did away with that. But
Yeah.
yeah, most of these, I would say 90% of them were having to replace the sewer line as well for the whole property, to the
Oh
tune
wow.
of $15,000 to $20,000. So no, this isn't just we're adding a little, bedroom over here. If we're doing kitchen
Exactly.
cabinets, all these things, the kitchen really hikes that cost up, you know.
Yep.
And so what I kind of view as the big impediment is cost and people's understanding of this. And then it's mostly, I would say 95% attributable to our building codes. The R values we're having to meet now. We've gone away from life safety issues to now energy efficiency and whatnot. And I think we're kind of over the hump of the value versus what we're really getting on, energy efficiency wise. So now we're having to spray the closed cell foam insulation pretty much everywhere, to
Mm-hmm.
meet the new codes, unless you're going to build with a 2x8 wall or so. But we're having to spray even in what's supposed to be a lower income, project. Our values, electric, all of these panels that they're coming up with, the new breakers, arc fault combo breakers, GFCI, $80 to $100 per breaker there used to be $5 and $6, and they
Wow.
nuisance strip. There's major issues there. And then the new one that's coming in, you guys have had fires there. We've had some fires here. So we're getting the Hardy siding, which is a fiber cement siding.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little, I like it quite a bit, but it's a little bit more expensive than what we would typically use, but it's still extra cost. We're having to use those, that kind of stuff in a
Yeah,
lot
we
of areas.
have Title 24, which is basically all energy efficiency
Hmm.
requirements for each build out.
Yep.
For all new ground up projects, you have to have solar. So
Yep.
that's an added
Wow.
cost. Yeah.
Solar, yeah.
Hmm.
And we're getting the fire sprinklers. It's part of the new code that's coming in from was it IECC. Um, Here, each municipality is kind of home ruling on what they want to do. So
Hmm.
Boulder County's like, oh yeah, the extra 25,000, let's definitely throw that in on this. And they
Oh my
adopted it.
God.
And so any detached ADU, I think even an attached one, has to have fire sprinklers, and you have to have a cistern on that, or you're upgrading your water line to be 1 inch to be able to, to do your 20-minute fire rating. Lakewood here said no, they're not doing that. It confuses me, like, why they can home rule on something like that, but other aspects they can't or decide
Yeah,
not to.
because for us, it's actually state law that they can't require for fire sprinklers on the detached ADU if
Mm,
the main house doesn't have any, which is
right.
the majority of our,
Yeah.
homes. So,
Yeah.
but sometimes certain cities will still ask for it. So it's your
Hmm.
job to know, like, hey, you're asking for something that according to state law, and here's the state code that says we should not request or
Right.
require for fire sprinklers.
I'll say
But
this though.
yeah,
Oftentimes the building departments don't know their own rules.
they
And
don't.
there's
And you and
so
I talked
many.
about that. Like a lot of the friction is similar to what we still see here. We don't have it all figured out, but you do get a lot of friction working with specific, cities, which is
Mhm.
why I like to focus on cities that just have a streamlined process. Like Long
Right.
Beach, we have sometimes even over the counter approval.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I shared one of the projects, I think. I'll show you real quick and then we'll wrap up here.
Sure.
But I've learned so much from like what's possible out there, and I think it's great. So I'll show you this project real quick. Let's see here. So this one's in Long Beach.
Okay.
And what we did here was the property was originally a 2-bed, 1 bath, and we turned that into a 4-bed, 2 bath. We kept the garage, we didn't convert that. But what we did back here was we added two 1,200 square foot ADUs, essentially, but they're homes. Each one is 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, 1,200 square feet up top, bottom, 3, 2, and it's 2 separate units. And we got this approved over the counter in Long Beach by paying, a little bit extra for that over the counter approval. And we were able to build this in 7.5 months, which is pretty impressive,
Yeah.
considering like other cities would probably take a little bit longer. And
Right.
the acquisition was 820. The total cost to build retail was 750,000, and the projected value is 2.2. Of
Hmm.
course, that's on the higher end, of
Right.
of what I estimated. But I mean, each unit is renting for 3,700. I think the
Mhm.
front unit is renting for 4,000, and he probably could have got more and possibly converted the garage, but just being mindful of like that specific pocket of Long Beach, we left the driveway for some
Right.
tandem parking option. We left the garage as well, and there's plenty of street parking on this street. But yeah, I mean that's this has been like our biggest strategy this year is going from
Right,
1
right.
to 3 units. Mhm.
Yeah. It'll be interesting with all that subdividing and the attached and whatnot. Again, renters' rights on the one hand or something like that, but then if you're having them attached and you're selling them off, are they going to get into some HOAs and different things like
You're
that?
gonna have to create an HOA. I mean,
Yeah.
we have AB 1033, which is condoizing ADUs, and the state passed AB 1033 last year, and they basically said we're gonna leave it up to hyperlocal cities and municipalities to adopt AB 1033. And so far, I think we've had like 8 to 9 cities in all of California that have said yes. So far, I've know of one that has sold off, and I think it's up north in San Jose. About 1,000 square foot ADU selling for 1.5. And and so San Jose has a checklist of what their, HOA process will look like the CCNRs, creating, all of that for 2 units on a lot, 3 units. I still don't know what that's going to look like.
Right.
It'd be funny to have a board of 2 people or 3 people, but
Yeah.
I think the lending world and the HOA world is going to have to come up with something strategic, something just different, right? Than your typical like CCNRs. But for now, as from what I know of, like most cities need to have a checklist on what that HOA process is going to look like if they opt in, which I'm sure Long Beach will opt in. San Diego recently opted in. So a lot of people are now building to sell off, each one. Just like in Washington, right? Thatch Nguyen, that one developer guy. He's doing that at scale, building multiple ones and selling them off. But he's building them like a true HOA, right? Like multiple
Right.
units. But when you're doing 1 to 3, 1 to 6 units, I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But
Sure.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you so much, Chris. How can people connect with you if, maybe we have some listeners who are thinking of investing out of state? Because sometimes it's not feasible in California, but it could be, out there, and maybe they want to
Sure.
implement the ADU strategy. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So contact us. Chris at prospect38.com is my email. Our website, www.denverhomeeditions.com. And we're on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube. We put up some shorts there on different
and
things. We're going to
LinkedIn,
up.
and
Yeah, we're
LinkedIn as
going to
well.
upload. I did an ADU presentation at the Denver Home Show. We'll probably upload that one, but I'm gonna redo that kind of in a format more like this and do that presentation, have slides pull up easier. And then again, we're putting this project together on HGTV. That should be coming out, I think, in June. So we'll have clips and a watch party for that. My phone number is 720-387-6867. Happy to call, discuss, the process, timelines. Like you said, we're at about, from start to finish, it's 10 to 12 months. That's what it is, and that's pretty consistent. But zoning issues, pricing, other considerations to be had, we could take a look at it, take a look at the property, and get you moving in the right direction. I appreciate the
Awesome.
opportunity. This has been great. It was a fast, easygoing conversation. Appreciate it. I try
Yeah.
to talk with my wife about this stuff. It doesn't always go so well. She just kind of glazes over, but it was interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity and your time on it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you for reaching out to me and even responding to me. I actually reached out to Chris through LinkedIn. I think I was just scrolling and, I'm always looking at just other people who are doing ADUs. And I really liked what I saw. And I was like, oh,
Thanks.
let me reach out to him and see if he wants to be on the podcast. And I rarely reach out like cold like outreach like that.
Sure.
Usually the people that are on the podcast, I either have met at an event or they're somehow in the ADU world. So I
Sure.
appreciate you taking this
Yeah.
on, and
It
hopefully
was
someone reaches out and maybe
right.
we'll touch base and collab on other
Yeah, it
things.
was probably the only time I've ever looked at a LinkedIn Uh, so whether it was God, the universe, serendipity, we made it happen, and it
Yeah,
turned
yeah.
out really well. So yeah, I appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.